Kia ora whānau. Ko Ngati Tahinga toku hapu. Ko Pokerewa rawa ko Weraroa toku marae. Ko Kareoi toku maunga. Ko Whaingaroa toku moana. Ko Huhana Hickey. They call me Doctor Who for short. That's the only reason I got my PhD, was so that I could be called Doctor Who. I'm the first and only female Doctor Who. This is my TARDIS. It's permanently transfixed into a wheelchair and it will never change. Why should you ever have to stand in a queue? I say if you can sit down on the job, it's much better. I want to talk to you a bit about, my background is law, and my background is also in psychology, but I also have a background in nursing many years ago. So I come from the caregiving perspective down to being myself a client. I'm a brain injury survivor, 1996, from a beating from an ex-partner back then, and it took 5 years for me to see the neurologist for the first time. It took 11 years to have an MRI done, and by then it was far too late. But it was a closed brain injury. I was very lucky that I could still kōrero or could still talk, but that's the problem with closed head injuries, is people see you looking fine and they don't understand what's going on. But I had seizures for the first 2 years and I was driving during that time. And I remember, because my son's an epileptic, but I remember driving one day and suddenly looking at my son and going, where the hell are we going? And I'd actually had an absent seizure while I was driving. Thank goodness I managed to pull aside and it was safe, but what could have happened? All because they didn't know whether I had primary progressive multiple sclerosis, because Māori don't get MS apparently, or a brain injury. Well, I have both, so that complicated it, and ACC rejected me, and I'm in Ministry of Health client, so I'm one of the pōhara lot, the poor lot, you know, we don't get anything, but I've been learning over the years that many ACC don't get anything either. So I've given a resource out. It's a resource of names of organisations and people that help people advocate for them. Some of them are free. Like if you're based in Auckland, you've got Auckland Disability Law, which is a free community law centre. If you're based elsewhere, there's some nationwide ones. Some are based in Christchurch, but they go around the country. They're based in different parts. The thing is that we often find we cannot advocate for ourselves. One of the worst clients that I ever have is me. I really am the worst client, okay? I have to have an advocate. And if I have to have an advocate when I'm arguing for things that I suddenly break down and cry over because I'm so personally involved, how effective is that? We can't advocate for ourselves, guys. That's the reality. Many of us think we can, and we might be very good to a certain point. But there is a point when you need another voice. And the thing also that you need to know is that as Māori, very often, when you get the first rejection, you walk away and go, stuff them. Bugger off. I don't want to know yous anymore. Nah, not going to have any help. And then you end up going down, 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 down to the point that I had a colleague, and I discovered that she pleaded guilty to a fraud which was questionable. But because she's been in her bed for 9 months as a tetraplegic, she actually pleaded guilty to save the hassle for $220,000 that Housing New Zealand did her for. Basically because the only caregivers that ACC would provide was her ex-partner. And so they said they were living together and charged her for that time, even though ACC would not provide her with a stranger as a carer or other whānau as caregivers. They would pay for the ex-partner and then they went and did her for $220,000. So that's the kind of trouble some of our people end up getting into. And so we need help. And we often need it when we don't think we do. Another thing you need to realise is te tiriti o waitangi is our right. And one of those rights is that we have the right and the basic human right as citizens in this country to access the help that we need to in order to access what we are as entitled to as non-Māori. Okay? Why is it that 33% of our people have a disability? 33%, 1 in 3 Māori have a disability. 85%, not 80%, 85% of those in prison who are Māori have an untreated diagnosis of behavioural cognitive brain injury type impairments, mental health, all that type. 85%. 49% of them, according to the 2013 statistics, are under the age of 25. Okay, the majority of that being learning disability of some kind, the other being brain injury, physical disability, those types of things. But we have a high number, and it's mostly our boys who end up with the physical brain injury, that type, because they're risk takers. How many times did I tell my sons, don't do this, so they go and do it anyway. No one ever listens to me till after the fact, but they are risk takers. It's a natural thing for a teenager to take a risk. It's part of our psyche. I took risks when I was young, and boy did I take risks. I made mistakes. I learned from those mistakes, but I had to take the mistake to learn from it, because my parents would say don't do it, so I'd go and do it. Just because they told me not to do it, because, that must be good and it must be fun. If my parents are telling me not to do it, it has to be good for you. So I went and did it anyway and got into trouble. But that's how we learn, and many of them do learn that way. The drink drivers, the ones who do the drugs, all of that stuff, they experiment. We can't always keep them safe, but we can sometimes. We have to pick up the pieces. And I've seen your story. I saw it in May, and I remember feeling it at that time. But I also know that you don't have to be alone. And part of my mahi is to try and teach our people that they are not needing to be alone. So that's some of the background. Is what I want to do is, I don't practice law anymore. I did practice as a lawyer for 10 years, but you guys wiped me out. You wore me down, I'm afraid, but I do put people on. I still get people asking for help, and I've got networks, and I do put people onto networks. And sometimes they help, sometimes they don't help. But we've got to try. And the thing is, we can't give up. Your boy, he struggled with wanting to leave this world, for a long time. I know that feeling personally throughout, where it's just too much. You want to give that over. But with the right support, when you gave up, came together as a whānau, what happened? He suddenly found that zest for life again. And it will change, and it will get better, and it will come. You'll have your good days, you'll have your bad days. But if you are alone, no wonder you're struggling and finding that struggle. And we're not together enough. As a whānau, we need to be stronger. As a ropu, as a project, it needs to be stronger. The advocacy has to be stronger. I know with Michael, I've worked with Michael a couple of times when he tried to sort of get some help, but then I also found the system broke down a lot of that help too. And it was really hard when the system stops you from being able to go too far. And so often we're stopped by the system. But as a collective, we have a voice. As individuals, our voice is weak. Collectively, our voice is strong. Remember when 20,000 people converged and Helen Clark called them all shirkers, haters? Remember all of that? Wasters? But what happened? We showed them that we were a voice to be reckoned with. And we can do that within brain injury world. As Māori, as a whānau, as a ropu, we can do it together. And I really want to encourage you. So I want to open up, because I don't want to be the one talking. I love talking. Believe me, it's my favourite pastime. Yep, I do it naturally in my sleep, I talk. So I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, maybe get some ideas of what some of the issues are, and see if I can have some ideas to help you forward. I may not be able to, but I might be able to. Society discriminates. We face it. I see it every day. I have a mobility dog, and I live in an area where migrants are a strong population group, and many of them come from countries that don't like dogs, and I often get abused for having my service dog in the mall. And it's not unusual. I'm used to seeing discrimination. I'm used to being abused at or being looked down on. That's society. Ignore them. I don't care what they think, because I know that I'm worth more than that. When we deal with a service, I would definitely recommend that you do not go without an advocate. Always take an advocate. And if you're based in Auckland, you can go through Auckland Disability Law and ask them, or there's other, networks out there. There's for the Māori community, there's Taupua Waiora, there's also CCS Disability Action, there's a whole range of other, and there's the TBI, network as well. And of course, but they get swamped, there's only a few of them, so you might need to use a range of people till you find the right person that advocates for you. But do not go without an advocate to work and income. Housing New Zealand, okay, any of those government agencies, because they are not there for your benefit. This government has given away its social contract to people in need. And the invalid benefit is just that, invalidates a human being the minute they go on the invalid. So, it's now called supported living payment, but it doesn't mean anything. The thing of the matter is you have a hidden disability. People look at you and they think you look fine. The reality of that is you need an advocate that is quite prepared to stand up to them and give them back what they get and what they give to you. But also you need to know the Social Security Act in and out as well, because many of the case managers don't know it. So the Social Security Act is everything. The Social Security Act is the act that oversees the welfare system. And within that legislation, it outlines what your rights are. It outlines that you can go for a review. If you're finding discrimination and you've documented everything, the other thing, document every phone call. Make a note of every phone call. Make a time, the date, and who you spoke to and what was said. Keep all the letters. Record the phone call if you can. Keep all the letters. And then you have evidence. If it proves that there's evidence of discrimination, you go to the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman is a person who reviews the government departments. And MSD, Work and Income, Housing New Zealand all come under the Ombudsman. So they're the overriding review agency. And the Ombudsman office will take all your evidence and will do a full review, and they're independent of the government. They cannot be touched by the government. They are not the government's sell-out little lackey. They are independent voice, and they will often have to come down against the government. I sit on the Human Rights Review Tribunal and I oversee the Human Rights Act, the Health and Disability Commissioners Act, the Privacy Act. And one of the areas is the Ombudsman, is the overall person to go to if discrimination is consistent, ongoing, and you have evidence of that. And as our young lawyer will know, evidence is everything. Hey, evidence. And that's hard with a brain injury, isn't it? To document. Agency. Choose who an agency can be for your husband, so that they have an agent, and then Work and Income have to work with that agent as well as your husband. The thing that you do is you say to them, first of all, you can get it online, the agent form, and you fill it out. If you become that, remember you have the right to a manager. They do have managers there. That's rubbish and that's a lie. And you can insist on waiting for the manager to show up. They record every single phone call. One rule of thumb, do not swear to the call centre operator. Don't swear. They will hang up on you immediately and you get a black mark. As frustrating as it is, do not swear. And they don't like giving out their email address. They don't like it, but I have my case manager's email address and you just say to them, I would like you to email me that information, please. Back it up with emails. They don't like it. Housing New Zealand don't like it either, and Work and Income don't like it, but they have the ability to email you, and you can say that's our preferred form of contact is email, please. If you're finding it too much, you can have another person or an advocate service to guide you. If you want to still do it yourself, they can also guide you with the knowledge. You can say to them, I don't know, I will ring you back and I'll just find out. And then you go and contact the advocate service and find out from the local community law centre, Citizens Advice Bureau. They can give you the right advice. Have a look at the Social Security Act, see what you're entitled to there, and then you contact them back and say, look, I'm entitled to this, and this, and you didn't tell me I can get a disability allowance. You didn't tell me we're entitled to an accommodation supplement. You didn't tell me that you will pay for the equipment that I need, such as a walking thing. You didn't tell me any of that, but I've realised now that I'm entitled and I wish to claim my entitlement. And that's how you can go about it. The knowledge is empowerment. Education. You only need to know one piece of legislation, the Social Security Act. And you can get that on Google. And then if you've got discrimination, you've got the Human Rights Act. If you're accessing health and disability services, you've got the Health and Disability Commissioners Act, the 11 or 10 Code of Rights. And out of those Code of Rights, if there's a breach, they can, for free, have an advocate that can help you access better services through your health and disability. Take a deep breath before you pick up the phone call and desensitise yourself. So remove yourself one step away from it being a personal issue. You're advocating for your husband. Okay, as an advocate for your husband, you're dealing with your husband, even though it affects you. If you're going to be an effective voice to advocate for him, you just state that I am his agent and I will be advocating for him. Speak to me. And when they start talking to you, write down everything that they're saying and then just think before you make a response to anything. If you're starting to get upset, you can say, I would like to talk to your manager, please, or I would like a different case manager. I don't think I can talk to you about this any further. You're upsetting me. You know, and just lay it, try and be as calm as you can. A really effective advocate is one who doesn't raise their voice, because I've heard the call centre people on the other end go, you've got that attitude? You're starting to get that attitude. You don't need to talk to me like that. You know, I'm not going to put up with this, you know. I'm hanging up now. I'm not going to put up with this. So you don't need to talk to me like that. I deserve to be respected. I don't need you to talk to me like that. I'm going to ban you from here. So the only way you're going to be effective with someone that gets reactive like that is the best way to ever succeed with them is keep your voice calm, slow and clear. And you say, no, I am feeling slightly frustrated by the way that you're responding. I don't think it is appropriate. And you just come back at them. And I'll tell you what, they will hate it because they can't counter that. And so they will have to put it on to someone else. That's the effectiveness of a really good advocate. You can say, I am Kingy, you know, I'm ringing up for Kingy, I'm his wife, but I'm also his agent, and therefore I have agency on the form, and I would like to discuss with you this issue, please. Okay, and remember too, brevity is clarity. That was what I was taught in law school. Brevity is clarity. So the less you say, the clearer it is, the more effective you are. If you're going to give them the whole backstory to it. Look, 20 years ago I acquired a brain injury, and when I acquired the brain injury, I spent about 5 years really not, you know, quite scrambled. But I'm quite articulate now, as you can tell, but you can't tell that I've got a brain injury because you can't see it. But I'm, you know, 5 hours later, they're sitting there, they've gone to sleep, and they've gone home actually, because you've just, you know, waffled. It's hard to centre. You know, and I do that in my writing all the time. You know, academic writing, it's brevity is clarity, and that's all I keep repeating to myself like a duck. But, you know, you've got to be very clear. And so before you make the phone call, write down the points you want to raise with them, and then make sure you stick to those points. And each point, you make sure each point is resolved. It's the most effective way that you can deal with anybody. If you don't go in there with a plan, you're going to come out frustrated. Guaranteed. And that's what advocates should be able to do. A good advocate should be able to argue in that way, you know, without also getting into the emotional stuff as well, and then fighting with them and getting on the table and starting to threaten them. You know, if you've got an advocate that does that, get rid of them and go grab an advocate that's not going to get emotional. You know, you need advocates. I mean, if you're based in Māori in Auckland, there's a really good advocate at the Community Law Centre called Ida, and she's brilliant. She's Ida, and she's really good. She's been there for over 20 years. She knows her stuff around work and income. She knows it backwards and forwards. And they're free. The Community Law Centre is free, IDA's free. She knows Housing New Zealand, work and income. She knows how to deal with council. She knows how to deal with government. She knows how to deal with finances. And also the Māori Citizens Advice Bureau is also really good, especially around budgeting and financials. So, you know, and sometimes it might be that you might have to go bankrupt, but do voluntary bankruptcy in order to get on top of the bills again and get back your life together. Because sometimes what happens with brain injury, it's not just dealing with work and income, but it's also your finances suddenly go upside down. You've lost your job. All your income has changed. So there's a whole bunch of things that can happen. Find the advocates that will be right for you. Find the ones. You don't need one advocate either. And one service might be effective in one thing, another might be effective in another. If you have a team, it might be that you have a team meeting with them all, and they can all work out together where they can be effective with you. Build your team. You know, and one of the key things, in fact, I'll put my plug in for my research here. I'm looking at, for tamaki makaurau, any Māori whānau out there that want to be part of my research, I'm looking at the health and disability experiences of whānau haua. The whānau haua being whānau first. We are whānau first. And one of the things that struck out with your story was the issue of, and your one too, was whānau. The whānau, your parents, you know, the whānau are the key. If the whānau is strong and able to hold strong. And sometimes I wonder if you've thought about getting whānau ora on board to build some of the goals around brain injury, bringing whānau ora in to develop some of those skills and things and to deal with some of the issues, because they fund you and they fund the people that can come on board to help. And I've seen lives change with whānau ora, with our haua, with our disabled whānau. But where whānau is strong, the healing occurs. Where whānau is weak, the healing doesn't occur as well. And that's a reality. For Māori, that's central. Our whānau, I'm very isolated. I'm lucky I have a wonderful partner. And without my partner and my oldest son, my youngest son, my oldest lives in Aussie, my youngest son, I would be alone. I don't have anyone else. I haven't, and it wasn't until recently I met Leanne. And now I've discovered I've got cousins, and I've suddenly got another whānau. And, and I'll cry, because that's part of the healing that comes with who you are as being Māori. And when you're on your own and you fight on your own, it's actually quite ineffective. And it's not the best. But sometimes it takes you to being on your own before your whānau rebuilds as well. It takes that cutting away of the edges in order to bring the whānau strong together. And the reason for that is often the whānau have had their own issues before the brain injury. And often those own issues come up. They rear their ugly head, and then the whānau come back together, and then they come back together stronger. They come back together healing themselves, and then they become more effective. And that's the key. That is the key.
What about power of attorney?
Well, you've got three types. Now, you've got power of attorney, which is if you're going away and you want your cat fed or the house looked after and the mail collected, you can have a temporary power of attorney. And that you can just write that on a piece of paper that I grant power of attorney to so-and-so to do the following things. Then you've got enduring power of attorney. Enduring a power of attorney is renewed every 3 to 5 years. Now, you have to have lawyers involved, both parties. And it's when you've got capacity that you can do your enduring power of attorney, right? The enduring power of attorney occurs where both sides go and see their own lawyer with the documentation, draw up the enduring power of attorney. The person who's going to oversee, if you end up lacking capacity, the person like the wife, if the husband's going to lack capacity, the wife goes to see her lawyer, and then she becomes the attorney. Now, she can either be both financial and property, or medical, personal and financial, or just financial, or just personal. You could have 2 power of attorney. You could have 3. It could be the whānau together as power of attorney. Now, if you've had your accident and you lack mental capacity legally, then you have to go through the courts to go for personal property rights. And that's a form of enduring power of attorney, but it's decided by the judge who is going to be the power of attorney for that individual. And it can be whānau, but it might be an agency. Where there is no whānau, often an agent in the rest home or residential environment that they're in will be the power of attorney on behalf of. So one thing I say to people is, don't wait till you've lost your ability to consent. Make the decision before you lose that ability to get your power of attorney sorted out. Because one day, you might just suddenly one day, whatever happens, Alzheimer's kicks in, whatever, it happens, you then suddenly cannot make your own decisions. All of a sudden, we don't know who can make the decisions for you. The banks won't accept anyone else because you haven't got agency. Work and income won't talk to your partner because they haven't got agency. All of those things. So it becomes a problem. So you either go through your lawyers to arrange for the triple PR, which is the Personal Protection of Property Rights Act, or else you go through the enduring power of attorney together as a couple or as a family member and the adult child. If they don't lack capacity, they can do that, and you make your choice, or the courts do it on your behalf. So that's a good question, because often we wonder who makes those decisions. Get your wills done. Okay, I'm not saying you're going to get run over going home tomorrow, but get your wills done. They can be done cheaply, but get it done. Otherwise, you've got to go through probate, and it can take up to 5 years in some cases, and it may not go the way you wanted it to go. So you've got to do those things. You've got to make sure that they're done. I know it's boring, and it costs money to go and see a lawyer, and it's not cheap, but it's an investment in how you make decisions in your life and how those decisions are made on your behalf. So, do not give up on anything, but also find the advocates that can best advocate for your case. Because honestly, you are entitled. Do not ever think you're not. I see too many. I don't fight for Pākehā rights. No offence, I don't. And the reason I don't is because the disability community in the Pākehā world, their gaps are closing in disparities. The world for Māori with disability, their gaps are widening. And so I fight full-time for Māori with disabilities simply because our voice, we feel whakamā. There's nothing to be whakamā about. We do not have a makutu, we do not carry a hara. The Old Testament is rubbish in that regard. What was told to us by the missionaries is not true. Prior to colonisation, we were included and incorporated and part of the whānau. The majority of us were. There was always the odd one that, whatever mental health that was seen to have black juju, dark juju. But the majority of disability, we were accepted and embraced, If you were deaf, you weren't kicked out of your community. If you were blind, you weren't kicked out. You became a great mirimiri artist if you were blind. In fact, they were known as great tohunga of the mirimiri. And the rongoa for different other ones. And the deaf, there was a whole marae that did their own form of sign language, and what they did is when they went to go and raid other hapu and iwi, is they used to sign everyone on the top of each hill because that's how they could do it, because they didn't have to do it with noise. And they were deaf, so they did it all through sign language, their form of sign language. So, what we need to remember here, guys, is getting a disability is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to feel whakamā about. It's not something to feel whakahihi about. You need to realise that we are Māori, but we are whānau first. And as whānau, we can claim our same place in this world as anybody else. And nobody should tell us otherwise. And while we struggle and we heal over our brain injury, remember your place is as a whānau member. And as whānau together, work together. And I do believe whānau order is a good tool to use, by the way. Get hold of whānau order if you can. It will help you. Because what they do is they bring on board the coordinators that will have the skills, and you get the first $5,000 that they grant out goes towards the coordinators, the facilitators, the facilities to work out a plan. Then there's a $20,000 grant available for the second phase of that plan. And that second phase it might be to get your brother fit again, walking. And so that might be that will pay for the physios or the OTs or the specialists or the equipment needed in order for the brother to get well again. And it might be to get the counselling and the support for you guys and respite for you guys, so that there can also be a plan of mum having some time out for herself 1 day a week, 2 days a week, getting 2 days off to go and have a miri herself. It might be that there might be some upskilling training happening, and so someone will come in and train you. And that's what whānau order can do. So utilise it. It's got its faults, but it's also it's one tool that you can get hold of that can make a difference to whānau with a brain injury that isn't wrapped around a whole bunch of hoops once you get the advocate or the organisation to fight for you on that. No, it has no effect on it because you're not receiving any income. You don't get paid for anything. You pay for coordinators, and the funds get released to the people. So you might say, there's the invoice for blah, blah. It's all agreed to with the organisation that oversees it, and then they will pay those people themselves. So you don't worry about the money side. It's about getting on with having a plan to help your whānau not just survive, but thrive. Because the one thing we've got to do as a whānau is we've got to turn ourselves around and make it work for us as a whānau. And make ourselves thrive, not just survive. And as you said, I can, I will. I know my condition is progressive, and I know there's no way I can ever be healed to that extent. But I'm comfortable with that. I'm a Buddhist. Buddhism talks about suffering. Hey, the more I suffer, the more empathetic I'm supposed to be. I don't think some of my clients feel that way, but, I look at it as a good tool for keeping myself real. So thank you, whānau, and good luck, and enjoy the rest of this weekend.